Who's buying Britain? Britain's housing market has long been the cornerstone of financial security, family stability, and generational wealth. But in recent decades, a shift has taken place. The issue isn't just affordability anymore, it's that a smaller share of the population now owns homes. Home ownership in the UK peaked in the early 2000s, with about 70 to 71% of householders owning their own home. As the government notes, owner occupation remained the largest tenure group, with 16 million households representing 65% of all households in England in 2023 to 2024. Ownership rates were highest in 2003 at 71% of households, but steadily declined post-financial crisis in the early 2010s to a low point in 2013 to 2014, 63%. Since then, levels have struggled to recover, and today home ownership remains around 65%, while private renting has almost doubled over the past 2 decades. The decline is sharpest for younger generations. In 1997, 55% of 25 to 34-year-olds owned their own home, but by 2017 the figure was just 35%. Among middle-income young adults, home ownership fell from 65% in 1995 to 1996 to 27% in 2015 to 2016. The private rented sector now covers nearly 19% of households in England, with the English Private Landlords Survey 2024 stating the number of households in the sector rose by 52% between 2008 to 2009 and 2023 to 2024, from 3.1 million to 4.7 million households. The private rented sector is now the second largest tenure in England and is home to 19% of all households. Meanwhile, the number of young people aged 20 to 34 living with their parents has risen by 10% over the past decade, from 3.3 million in 2014 to 3.6 million in 2024. The ONS said this was part of the trend of adults reaching milestones later in life and could be explained by a number of factors, including increased housing costs. This begs the question, if fewer people are buying homes, who is? Traditionally, the UK rental sector was dominated by small landlords who owned just 1 or 2 buy-to-let properties, often as a side investment or retirement plan. But that landscape has changed dramatically over the past decade. Rising house prices, tighter tax rules on buy-to-let and new regulations have squeezed many smaller landlords while creating space for bigger players. Corporate investors, both financial and institutional, are stepping in, often buying up large numbers of properties at once or commissioning purpose-built rental blocks designed specifically for long-term tenants. This shift is reshaping the market, concentrating ownership in fewer hands and raising questions about affordability, completion, and the future of home ownership in the UK. When we talk about who's buying Britain, it's no longer just individual landlords with a couple of buy-to-let properties. The stage is now dominated by financial giants and household names. Grainger, the UK's largest listed landlord, already owns more than 11,000 homes. Lloyds Banking Group, through its Citra Living brand, has set its sights on acquiring 50,000 homes by 2030, with the ambition of becoming the country's biggest landlord. Legal & General has poured more than £3 billion into buy-to-rent schemes, while M&G Real Estate and Aviva Investors are steadily expanding their residential portfolios. AXA investment managers are managing large-scale housing across Europe, and Blackstone and Greystone have snapped up vast numbers of UK rental and student units. Even Goldman & Sachs, along APG, are major players in the buy-to-rent market. And it's not just financial institutions. Household names are joining in too. John Lewis plans to turn surplus retail land into 10,000 rental homes. IKEA is investing in residential projects here in the UK, and even Marks & Spencer is repurposing rental land for mixed-use housing. Together, these companies are reshaping the rental landscape and raising big questions about who really owns Britain's homes. This list highlights the scale of transformation. The face of the UK's landlords is shifting from small-scale investors to giant billion-pound corporations. The UK's housing shift bears resemblance to what happened in the United States after the 2008 financial crash. In the US, Wall Street firms began buying foreclosed homes in bulk. Companies like Invitation Homes, backed by Blackstone, and American Homes for Rent amassed huge portfolios. Invitation Homes alone now owns more than 80,000 houses. Today, 1/10 of the US apartments owned by private equity. Blackstone's holdings make up over 10% of the 2.2 million total units, according to a recent report. Large firms such as Greystar, Equity Residential, Avalon Bay, and Blackstone collectively own or manage millions of apartments across the US. In some metros like Atlanta, Phoenix, Charlotte, and Dallas, Wall Street buyers have accounted for up to 1 in 5 home purchases at a time. The result has been reduced supply for ordinary buyers, driving prices up and making it harder for families to get on the ladder. The fear is that Britain is heading down the same path. The influx of corporate landlords creates 2 challenges. First, by buying in bulk, these companies effectively reduce the stock of available homes to individual buyers. Second, they set rental benchmarks higher, locking into a cycle where saving for a deposit becomes nearly impossible. According to ONS data, the average UK house price reached £286,000 in July 2025, a 60% increase compared to 2010. Meanwhile, wages have not kept pace, leaving affordability stretched to breaking point. The Institute for Fiscal Studies reports that housing costs now consume 40% of income for the average private renter under 35. The entry of brands like John Lewis, IKEA, and Marks & Spencer highlights another dynamic, the repurposing of retail land. As high street retail declines, these companies are transforming their spaces into housing, capitalizing on urban demand. While this provides much needed support, it also shifts ownership away from individuals and deeper into corporate hands. At the heart of this crisis is generational inequality. Baby boomers largely benefited from affordable housing prices and rising values. Millennials and Generation Z, however, face stagnant wages, soaring rents, and ownership slipping beyond reach. The challenge is not simply one of supply. Britain needs more homes, but it also needs a system that balances investment with accessibility. Institutional investors argue they bring professional investment management, long-term stability, and new supply. Critics counter that their sheer size distorts the market, turning homes into financial assets rather than places to live. To create a balanced system, policymakers must answer difficult questions. Should there be limits on bulk buying by corporations? Can taxation or regulation ensure homes remain affordable for first-time buyers? How do we encourage small-scale ownership without discouraging investment? What role should public housing play in offsetting corporate dominance? Right now, institutional investors own only a small slice of the UK rental market, around 2 to 3% of all rental homes. Most properties are still held by individuals or small landlords, but the trend is clear. The share of homes owned by billion-pound corporations is rising every single year, especially in build-to-rent developments and through retail conversions. In other words, Britain isn't at US levels yet, where private equity controls 1 in 10 apartments, but the same forces are at play here. Rising prices, squeezing small landlords, and global capital flowing into housing. Companies like Grainger, Lloyds, Legal & General, John Lewis, and IKEA are only the beginning. Over time, they aim to become much bigger players, reshaping who owns Britain's homes and what that means for ordinary families trying to get on the ladder. How do you think the rise of institutional investors will affect the UK housing market? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and don't forget to subscribe.